Where there is no vision, the people perish.
Well, I exercised, so now I'm fit. No, I've got to do that over and over. And leadership is that. If we're not doing it over and over, you never achieve leadership.
Alignment multiplies impact. Some of my best plans at Chick-fil-A have come from people who have literally said,
Welcome to Brewing Better Leaders, a podcast focused around building up and equipping leaders with the knowledge and skills to lead others in excellence. I'm Bill Montgomery, CEO of River Radio Ministries. On today's episode, I sit down with Seth Flores, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Grandview Yard, and we're at Coffee Connections in Hilliard, Ohio. We're going to discuss vision, receiving feedback, and how to build a team aligned towards a singular goal.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate it.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Well,
that's good training. My pleasure. Good job. That's great.
You've indoctrinated me well.
This is good leadership, good influence.
It's the modeling.
That's
and
right.
Now it's
That's setting the example.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll come serve lunch today over at the shop.
Perfect.
I would love that. Well, thanks for being here. I know that leadership is such a core of Chick-fil-A, and frankly, is a core of who you were before you even came to Chick-fil-A, and that's why I thought you'd be such an excellent guest for the podcast, as we're just trying to help people in their leadership skills, those that are interested in growing as leaders, whether they've just started out on that journey or whether they're toward the end of it. Any generic thoughts you might have about leadership before we get going, and just its importance and why it's something that you've become so passionate about?
Yeah, so leadership, I think, as I sort of teach this to my own leaders in the restaurant, is leaders are people and leadership is a process. I think oftentimes we conflate the two, but really you have to ask, if leaders are the people who hold all the influence, then leadership is a process that they activate over and over again to create success. So like, what is that process? What does that look like? And I think great leaders do four things over and over again to create success. They may have different terms for it, but the way I describe it as great leaders cast vision, great leaders engage their team, great leaders hold people accountable, and then great leaders measure the results. Then they do that over and over again to create success. And so as I think about leadership in general, I think every leader has to have a process. And I think it all starts with leadership vision.
Boy, that's good. It's hearing that process and hearing that that's repeatable. It reminds me of kind of like, a lawn is never mowed. Like I've got to do it over and over. It's not like, well, I exercised, so now I'm fit. No, I've got to do that over and over. And leadership is that. If we're not doing it over and over, you never achieve leadership.
Right. Yeah. So like leadership is like, as you mentioned, mowing a lawn. I would tell people it's like building a house that you're never done building. So you just fall in love with the process.
Very good.
And I think when I think about all the different tenets I just listed, it has to start with vision. It has to start with that. One of my favorite interactions with the former CEO of Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy.
Oh yeah.
He was being interviewed by some leaders and some team members in a store, and I happened to be nearby, and a team member said, Dan Cathy, you're the CEO. If you had to be any part of a car, what would you be? And I was like, oh no, not this question.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dan just graciously and generously just said, thank you for that question. But if I had to answer, I would say, as the CEO, the number one leader, it would be my job to be the headlights, because it's my job to cast light and vision in front of everyone who's following me. Wow. And I just think that's so important. When we think about vision, obviously, some of the questions we could ask is like, why is it so important? Well, the reason why it's so important is because it is the why. Vision is why. Mission is what. Then your objectives is how you accomplish the mission to fulfill the vision. And so I love when Andy Stanley talks about vision and visioneering, his book Visioneering. He says this very easy, it's such a great quote. He says, vision is the mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. And so leaders are people who have a purpose and they have a direction of where they're going, but then they have this ability to have people to follow them and to go with them and want to follow them. And so when I think about vision, I just think it's so important that we detail for our people who are following us, like, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, and this is why it's important. And here's how you play into that process. And so I just think those are super helpful ways to kind of maybe just get us kicked off and started talking about leadership vision. And I found those sort of definitions and illustrations to be helpful.
Thinking of somebody that may be somewhere in the middle of leadership. So, not every, there's a few Dan Cathys, and there's a lot of us that are down that chain. Do you as a leader in that, do you just get your vision from that kind of that one visionary, or is there, like for you, you've got a restaurant that is obviously trying to accomplish Chick-fil-A's vision, but do you have some of your own vision for that restaurant that fits under that umbrella?
Yeah, I think vision can fall in any part of the leadership org chart. So it can be the CEO, and it can be the team leader at the maybe the lowest level leader.
Yeah.
It could be the general manager. It could be an owner like myself. And so, and I think the idea is there has to be some sort of alignment. So like if the CEO, like at Chick-fil-A Grandview Yard, we want our vision to be aligned with our corporate purpose.
Of course.
At Chick-fil-A, we are trying to glorify God by being faithful stewards of all that's entrusted to us, and to make a positive impact on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. And so really, that's a little bit of a mouthful, but really helpful if you just hear the big three ideas. At Chick-fil-A, we're trying to glorify God. We're trying to be faithful stewards, and we're trying to make a positive impact. Surely as an owner, or even as my general managers and directors do, you can find some part of that vision that you can make your own and make it sticky and say, this is what I'm going to focus on in my role. And so there really can be an alignment and an adoption of a larger vision, but then you can localize it. And so I think when you have people who are maybe in like the middle manager role, maybe they're not the CEO, maybe they're not the owner, maybe they're not the leader of a big radio station, like some people I know who won't be named, I would say very simply to them, like, you still have influence, right? And so leaders are people who have this vision, but they have this map in their mind, and they have this magnet in their heart, right? They are people, whether they're just a supervisor, or they're a director for you, or they're a director for me, they know where they are and they know where they're trying to go in their role, but they have this attractiveness, they have this magnet in their heart where people want to follow them and go with them on their worthwhile journey, and really to fulfill the vision. And so really, I think there could be maybe an uppercase V vision and then some lower visions that align with it for people's like specialized roles.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense, because again, if you're Dan Cathy, or if you're the executive leadership at Chick-fil-A, you're concerned about your vendors, you're concerned about your owners, you're concerned about your corporate people. But
absolutely.
for you, you're concerned about how do we do this in the scope of Grandview Yard, and your person that might be running the kitchen is like, how do we do this as we're behind the scenes and we're serving the upfront people? Everybody can align their roles to that different vision, I'm guessing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's so important when the people who have the least amount of contact with your guests are the most passionate about your vision, you've succeeded as a person who has leadership vision. It's kind of like, the president walking through the space station and saying to the janitor, what's your role here? And he says, my role is to put a man on the moon, and it's like, wow, the janitor's bought into this, and he's not even part of Central Command. He doesn't work in a high level office at Houston. He's literally just mopping the floors. So you can see that even the person who's keeping the floors clean, for the commanders to walk down the hallway to put a man on the moon, they can all work together to accomplish the vision. And that's so important. I think the opposite is also kind of a cautionary tale. And that is one of the reasons why leadership vision has to be communicated often, creatively, and enthusiastically, is because sadly, like vision leaks.
Oh, yes.
Over time, if you stop talking about the vision, if you stop mentioning it, if you don't speak about it enthusiastically or creatively, if people wonder, are you really bought in? As a pastor, the idea is if there's fog in the pulpit, there's mist in the pews.
Oh yeah,
there's not clarity from the top. It will leak over time.
Yeah.
And people will start to create their own vision. They'll start to create their own mission, their own sense of where we're going. Then you have all these miniature silos, miniature visions where people are going in all these different directions. And so there's really this idea where we want to keep people centered on the same vision, right? Because this idea of leadership vision, when you have alignment multiplies impact. And so you want people, it's like driving a bad car. We all drove bad cars when we were teenagers, right? Our first cars, mine cost under $2,000, and it had a bullet wound in the back. It was terrible. And guess what? It had terrible alignment. Like when you let go of the steering wheel for 5 seconds, it almost wanted to wreck you.
Oh my goodness.
But guess what? It got you from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And now I drive a brand new car.
Yes.
And it has incredible alignment. And so you can see that, yes, even disjointed organizations can still sort of head somewhere, but organizations that have alignment can get there so much faster, so much smoother. And I think that's what leadership vision's about, right? It's the responsibility of the leader to see first, to see faster, and to see further for his organization, to be the headlights that cast the vision ahead so that people can say, oh, I know where we're going because I'm watching where my leader's going and I understand his vision, and he communicates it often enough to where he's plugging the leaks and he's keeping everybody aligned.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like sometimes as that leader's doing that, it's like, hey, I got to turn on the fog lights now because the path got a little cloudier because of this circumstance, or I got to turn on the brights, or hey, we've got those these big lamps. I'm going to fire those up and see, because things are changing. Yeah. And so you've got to maybe recast the vision, or you've got to retool the vision and be out in front to know where are we going, and then communicate that back to everybody else.
Absolutely. And I think even when you think about turning on the fog lamps and trying to translate all of these analogies to leadership 101 or practical leadership, that can feel like casting leadership vision can take a huge toil, or it can be a really large undertaking. But the truth is actually opposite. It can be very small. Like if you walk into the River radio station and someone greets you at the front desk and they're super hospitable, they are genuinely interested in you, and then before you go to the back to do your segment with someone who's going to be on air, they say, how can I pray for you today? And then as a CEO, you would come in and say, wow, the way you engaged that person, the way you were hospitable, the way you cared for them, you're doing exactly what we want to do here at our radio station. And by doing that, you are recasting the vision, you are reaffirming the vision, and you're recognizing her for being aligned with your vision for the company. So sometimes it's not even a large, like, I need to have an all staff gathering. It's just small recognitions that connect people, and that intentionality to connect them back to the vision.
So practically, as you see vision realized in your people's lives, you just call it out, and then as they see it in the other lives of their people, that they're working with, they call it out, and it's just that continual, that's helping recast it by just observing it and encouraging it.
Yeah, certainly. And I think for us, we have our 4 core values at our store.
Yes.
That all of our core values help us to fulfill our vision. So when we see people doing well, we actually go to the back and we get one of the tabs that has that core value on it, and we write their name down, what they did, and the person who saw it, and then we talk about it in front of the entire team.
Oh, yeah.
And by doing that, we're highlighting these people are working out the vision, and we're reaffirming them for it. And then everyone around goes, wow, this person really got spotlighted here. And it's because they are connected and they are fulfilling our vision. And so, and then I think just maybe just one idea I would have more for like the kingdom business leader, the pastor, the nonprofit, is we're so blessed in Proverbs to have such an impactful, in Proverbs 29, where we have such an impactful proverb where we get to see both the negative and positive aspect of vision, where it says this, where there is no vision, the people perish. Which I think a lot of us have heard that before. And hopefully, as a leader, you read that verse and go, I hope my people aren't perishing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then two, if that's true in the negative sense, then the inverted has to be true in the positive sense.
Yeah.
And that is where there is vision, the people thrive.
Oh yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're casting vision. And then sometimes when I talk to leaders, they're like, I don't know how to cast vision. Like, I'm the number one guy, and I don't really know where do I find my vision, or how do I clarify it, or how do I understand what my vision or what my purpose is. And I think this idea of where there is no vision, the people perish, that word in Proverbs is really a vision you get from the Lord. And that the Lord puts inside of the heart of the leader. And so I would just encourage people, as you want to be a leader who casts visions well, you want to be someone who has that culture alignment, organizational alignment, and you have maybe a lack of clarity on what is my vision. Like, I would say for the kingdom business leader, nonprofit leader, or even pastor or ministry leader, I would say spend time praying about it. Wow. Like God is the leader of all of us, right? And he cares about what we do for his glory. He cares about where we're leading people. And I believe if we're faithful to pray about, ask him to clarify, what is our vision? Where are we headed? What do we want to be true in 5 years that's not true today?
Yeah.
God will very clearly lead us to discover that. And I think the people won't perish. The people will thrive because of that.
Hey, you. Yes, you. That's who I'm talking to. When is the last time you thanked that coworker, that assistant, that parent, that teacher, that mentor, that person that changed the trajectory of your career, or that person that helps you get things done every day, the one that has saved you. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's one of your kids, but you need to say thank you. Well, give them a gift that they not only deserve, but a gift that they are going to love, and that is from my friends, Dolce Sweets. Their espresso chocolate, my personal favorite here at Brewing Better Leaders, but they have chocolate, they've got amazing, amazing gifts. You are going to be pleased, and more importantly, the person that you get the gift for is gonna know that you care about them because you got a gift from Dolce Sweets. And for my viewers, my listeners, 15% off when you use the code BREW. 15% off, use the code BREW at Dolce Sweets, DULCI. I promise you, they will be thrilled. You can thank me later.
Yeah. It's interesting because if we believe that God wants to work things for our good, and He wants us to thrive, and He wants His, even perhaps in adversity, even in difficulty, which we know happens. But if we ask Him, He's going to give us that vision, for the thriving of His people. Yeah. And I think that's something I've even been kind of working through in the past several months, is just am I spending enough time in prayer asking God, Amen. What do you have for me? What do you have for these people that you've asked me to lead? And so I think that's such a good and important word right now that I think a lot of times gets left out of the leadership conversation, especially for people of faith.
Yeah, and I think there can feel like, as a leader, there's the temptation to feel like the requirement of a leader is to be omnicompetent. Like, I know what to do all the time. And the truth is, like, we don't. We really don't. And sometimes we make great plans, and by June, we're like, actually, this plan's a little bit better, so we're going to take a different direction here. Yeah. And that actually ends up leading us to have the best year ever because we had some humility around that. And so I think about, like, my process of creating leadership vision and wanting to be faithful with the process, but then also wanting to submit it to the Lord. I would say I go back to Proverbs 16:9, right? The mind of man plans his ways, but it's the Lord who directs his paths. So there's really this beautiful human and divine cooperation of, I've worked really hard to be faithful with the people and the process you've given me, but I also want to be humble enough to just lay it at your throne and say, Lord, please bless here what you want to bless, and keep directing and guiding me as we go along. And so I think that Proverbs 16:9 just gives us a really helpful kingdom blueprint of how we should lead people with vision, but then also show them that we are being led by God as they are following us. And I just think that's super helpful.
Yeah, I had one of my first real leaders when I started in my career, had a great saying, and I'd love to get your reaction to this, because sometimes we don't see all the way down the road because God has not opened that to us. And he'd go, we go as far as we can see until we can see further.
Oh, so good, so good. I love that. I need to write that down, actually. At Chick-fil-A, we say that we reserve the right to get smarter.
That is brilliant. I love that.
And it's helpful to say, like, even in the middle of a process or a quarter, we can say, it's just not working. And our customers are telling that, our team is telling that. And instead of just like, we want to, and really, you could kind of quote Andy Stanley again, like, we want to marry the mission and we want to date the methods, Boy, and so we want to date them even throughout the year and say, you know what, like, we've gone a little bit and now we want to go a little further. So we're going to need to maybe tweak our vision or tweak our mission or tweak our goal. And I think that's super helpful. And I think that is the exact opposite of that temptation of needing to pretend to be omnicompetent. Like only God can see around corners. None of us can. None of us know. There is in Ephesians 4, 1 Peter 4, Romans 12, and 1 Corinthians 12, all the 4 passages in the New Testament on spiritual gifts. Foresight is not one of them. None of us, that's right. None of us can peek around the corner and go, I know exactly what's going to happen when I start activating this leadership process to accomplish this leadership vision.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a lot of humility to say, like, I've been faithful to make my plans, but I've been humble enough to lay them at the Lord's feet and say, you know what? I'm reserving the right for the Lord to make me smarter, to go a different direction if I need to.
Man, that's a great thing. Maybe as we wrap up, talk more about, you've mentioned it a couple times in this, but humility in a leader, especially as it relates to vision and maybe just how you see those, married together.
Yeah, I would say most people don't describe leaders as humble. Leaders have to know where they are, know where they're going, so they have to be good at identifying problems and creating solutions.
Yeah.
People walk around going, "Hey, boss, like this is a problem," and then leaders look at it and point themselves, say, "Hey, I see this problem. How do I fix it?" Like that's the mantle of leadership.
Yeah.
It's just the understanding that humility leaves room in our leadership process and our leadership vision for other people to speak into it, for other data to influence us.
Yes.
I think like when you're in a room with someone who's like just really dynamic and they appear to have everything happening all the time, they know everything that's going on, they sometimes suck the oxygen out of the room. Like there's no margin even to contribute to their conversation. And I just would think like as a leader, I think we've all learned like it's just best to lead in a team.
Yeah.
And so I think humility would say, hey, I want to open up this leadership vision. Maybe I've done 60 or 70% of the work, but I want to be humble enough for all the people around me who I've placed there, who I'm leading. I want to be humble enough to say, guys, like, hey, if you were in my role, how would you do this differently? How would you make this better? Or if I was gone tomorrow and you were the guy, what would you do differently? Some of my best plans at Chick-fil-A have come from people who have literally said, hey, would you give me the opportunity to fail in this? And can we try it for a few months? And some of my best plans have come from that. Just being willing to say, you know what, like leadership vision, it doesn't mean you have to know everything, right? But it does mean you have to lead people in your care and you have to lead them with honor, dignity, and respect. And I think the best way to show that is to lead with some humility. To say, you know what, here's 60% of the idea, 70% of the idea, but I know it's not fully complete. And that humility would require us to say, what do other people think? And then also throughout the year to say, hey, can we assess this? Do we need to tweak this or change this? And so, and I think, one thing that maybe has been mentioned on these leadership talks is how important it is to be a servant leader. And that Jesus sets the ultimate example of someone who knew everything, someone who had everything, the person who could see around the corner, and yet there he is, tying a towel around his waist, getting on his hands and feet, washing the disciples' feet, demonstrating for us what he says in John 13:15, I have set for you an example. And like, what is that example? If it's anything, it's that kingdom leadership has to be humble. Even the guy who had it all together said, I'm setting for you an example, because he knew we wouldn't have it all together. He knew we wouldn't know everything. And so I just think like we're following, like that's our leader. That's who we're following. Ultimately we're following his kingdom headlights because we're trying to follow him into the kingdom. Whether you're the butcher, the baker, or the candlestick maker, all vocations, all callings can be sacred. And so we want to take our leadership vision and say, like, we're going to submit this under the lordship of Christ. And if we're submitting it under his lordship, then we should try to emulate his character. And his character was humble. And so should we.
Yeah, that's great. Seth, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it. I think you've given us a lot of great things to think about, and I just appreciate your desire to build leaders in the kingdom, whether it's through your work at Chick-fil-A, working at your church, working in the community. We're blessed by that here in Columbus. I'm very grateful for you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, my friend.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.